think it's important that we don't try and take the safest route now. It's like we've already taken all of this risk. Maybe it would have been better if we just stayed at some like company that we were at before and just like, try and climb the ladder or something. But we took a risk to now we're going to take ourselves out of the job market, go to the school. Yes, it's a great school, it's a great name, but when you come out, you're competing now with new students younger than us who are thinking a little bit different, and so I think it's important that we try and do the things that are risky but that are also super rewarding if we succeed.
Welcome listeners to the Style is Free podcast. Today we have Rongxin Zhang with us talking about blockchains and how it works and all the different applications involved. Thanks for coming on, Rongxin. He's a connected media student with me here at Cornell Tech, and we're in a lot of similar classes.
Hello everyone. My name is Rongxin and very happy to be here. This is an exciting time to be talking about blockchains and all of these applications. So yeah, thank you.
You wanted to break down blockchain for people, for our listeners who may not have as much technical background with it and how it works.
I think when people talk about blockchains, the first thing to think about is the currency, Bitcoin, Ethereum. But I think that blockchain is by itself a technology, and the currencies and all the applications, everything that you're hearing about in the news are things that are built on top of blockchains. And most people consider blockchains as what they call immutable database. So in some ways is that you can only write to it, and it's not something that once you've written something to it you can remove. I think that's one part which is very important about blockchains. And the other aspects which is important is that it's at least when blockchain started they were public. So the idea is that everybody can join in to this network and write something to this global database. But now of course you have things like company blockchains, enterprise blockchains. But I like to kind of split blockchains, cryptocurrencies, and the applications.
Makes a lot of sense. So what type of companies are you talking about? Because I've always thought blockchains as public as well.
Right.
So when you say there's private companies using it, who is that?
So right now, a lot of companies are trying to apply this new database technology to their internal infrastructure. For instance, banks that have back offices which do checking whether somebody has a certain amount of money to transact. They have things like sending money between banks and to do clearing maybe once a month, once a year. So they're trying to bring blockchain technology into this type of system to make it more efficient. So an example would be, let's say, two banks, they owe each other money. Every month they need to say, you owe me $10, I owe you $50 or whatever. Right. And so they run their internal blockchains in the two companies, and then they do all of this clearing on this network. And the idea is that they don't need to trust each other because technically this thing is write only, so you can only write to it, but you cannot remove some things, and the history is very clear. But in my opinion, I don't know if that's the best application.
Right, because if it's still just internal people writing to the blockchain, what I've heard is if you have control over 50% of the blockchain, you basically can write whatever you want, which makes it so great if you have a lot of people and crowdsource it. So yeah, that makes sense if it could still be fudged, I could see.
Exactly. I mean, they might as well just spin up a database.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it's privatized.
I mean, there's a company called Ripple, the Ripple token, all that stuff. They were the really early companies that were trying to do this. How successful it has been, I'm not sure.
And so what's it with Ripple? Is that it's tethered technology? Is that one? It's tied to the dollar or stable currency, or is that different?
That's a little bit different.
Okay.
So the idea with Ripple was they were one of the, I think, first companies. I believe they're originally based in Europe somewhere. And the idea is that they brought in a lot of big banks and said, look, you guys can use this technology to manage your internal infrastructures and make things more efficient. I'm not sure why they have a public token, but the thing was they were very early into this. They developed a lot of the technologies. Even though a lot of people think that what they have don't actually work. For instance, our professor Rafael Paz.
Oh, really?
He's constantly criticizing it, like every class. So he's not constantly criticizing it. He's just, discussing some of the weaknesses, some of the strengths.
You see some pitfalls in there.
Exactly.
Technology.
Exactly.
Interesting. So yeah, you're talking about like breaking down cryptocurrencies and like all of it into 3 different parts. Can you talk about those parts a little bit and how it works?
I think about blockchain as the underlying technology that allows people to build things on top of it. Cryptocurrencies as one application of that. And then I think that decentralization is a even broader topic that was around before blockchains. For instance, BitTorrent.
Oh, right.
That's decentralized technology. Kazaa, LimeWire.
Right, the whole Napster sharing files technology.
Exactly.
Yeah, those were big a little bit ago.
Yeah. I mean, they were like my life back then.
Right. Yeah.
All of my videos and stuff came from them.
Yeah, I remember I was really young. I had Napster, and like my brother had some friends over. I went somewhere else. And like deleted a lot of my Napster stuff, and after you could download stuff back, it was very upsetting to lose all that information. It was cool. Yeah, you could just get anything. Just if people had files and would share it around.
Right.
So you see this being like an extension of like that sharing community now into blockchains.
No, exactly. And I think a lot of the technology that was developed back then, like all this networking stuff, is being used now in blockchains. So like how do all of these computers on this network communicate with each other efficiently? They gossip to each other. I mean, they call it the gossip protocol.
They share a little bit of information with each, so it's everywhere, but not every computer holds everything. Is that kind of what goes on with gossip?
Yeah, I think that's one part of it. And the other part is that it's just the initially like sending information to people. Because, for instance, there's maybe, millions of computers on this network. Mm-hmm. You can't send everything at once to everybody.
Right.
You send it to all the people that you can connect to, and they send it to a bunch of all the other people, and the idea is that eventually everybody gets this message.
Interesting.
So yeah, a lot of this stuff I believe was developed early on in the early P2P applications. A lot of the stuff, for instance, with things like Tor, like how do you preserve privacy, how do you do encryption on these networks. Mm-hmm. Some of them are being applied to projects now. I think it's like a renaissance of all of these things that maybe failed before or just didn't get the mass adoption that they needed for whatever reason.
So what are some of the applications that you're like most excited about?
With blockchain specifically?
With blockchain.
I'm very interested in decentralized computing. The idea is that you can run programs on other people's computers. You can store files on other people's computers on this network that everybody can join into, but at the same time have the same efficiency as you have now with, let's say, AWS, but much cheaper. You have more control over your information, and it's also censorship resistant. So that's one area I'm interested in. So one of the projects in this space is called Filecoin. There's a bunch of other things like Storage, Saya, Maiden Safe. So these are all projects working on decentralized file storage. And the idea is that, people can join onto this network. I just plug my computer in. I've got 100 gigabytes of free space, and I can basically rent this out to people. Somebody that wants to store something, they just need to encrypt their files and then store on this network. And then they can retrieve this file from any other computer that is connected to this network.
Yeah, so like what if I shut my computer down but I'm on that network and your files are stored on my computer? How does that work?
So they solve this problem in 2 ways. The first is that as a person that's storing files, you have to put up a deposit. So let's say you want to store 1 gigabyte of files. You have to put up, let's say, $1,000. And then the idea is that once you've stored my file, the network will ask you for proofs that you're still up and that you're still holding my information. And let's say, for whatever reason, your computer dies, or for instance, you're just a bad person. Let's say, you just want to shut everything because you want to save power or whatever.
Right.
Then the network penalizes you and takes away parts of your deposit. So that's the incentive to why people should keep the computer up. But the other way they solve this is they basically do something called erasure coding. It's basically redundancy. They make your file that's maybe 1 gigabyte through some algorithms into something that's like 2 gigabytes, let's say. And then they store a bunch of these files on separate computers. And let's say 40% of all those computers die, your file will still be able to reconstruct itself.
Okay, so it's just it doesn't just save it on one person's computer, but it saves it throughout multiple people's computers so it can be recovered in case something happens.
Yeah, correct.
Cool.
So yeah, I mean, it still begs the question, well, does that make it more expensive now, because you have to store more files, technically.
And like how many people, like how much, I guess, availability is there for people who just always have their computers on willing to store stuff, like versus, because I know I have my laptop, I'll close it when I'm not using it sort of thing.
Right.
Like, are there people who have desktops willing to run it all the time, or would it be more efficient for like AWS or Google Cloud, like how they run them in bulk?
So you're maybe saying that for the average like person, let's say us, we don't really have, let's say, free space, or even if we do, it's not something that we will leave connected to the network forever.
Right. And like, is that better than like, I know it's like centralized with AWS or Google, but somewhere that just gets a bunch of servers, they do all the redundancy and sharding and everything just on one subset of servers? Is that, I'm just trying to think like how many people actually leave their computer running all the time, and how reliable is that? Like what the market size is there.
Of the storage providers.
Yeah, of like decentralized storage providing. Like how many people are actually would participate in that? Like for like constant access as you get with AWS.
In the very beginning, maybe somebody will be on this network trying to, make $1 or something with their own laptop. But I think eventually it'll be similar to Bitcoin mining or cryptocurrency mining, where, people will turn this into a business. Let's say, we buy 100 hard drives and plug this into the network, like dedicated systems.
There's like small business servers.
Exactly. Like now maybe you can have more people join on to this network, so it's not just AWS that can do it.
Yeah, and if they're not saving space, they can mine stuff or something else on the side. Just so you think people are going to be gathering computing power to just like save files and like make money on the digital market?
I definitely think so, especially with file storage. Because with, for instance, traditional Bitcoin and cryptocurrency mining, at least as of now, the majority is based on these like very inefficient, they call it proof of work algorithms, where they're just burning electricity.
Right.
And it does nothing. If people are providing storage, then what they're doing with this resource is actually useful.
Right, it's not just wasting computing power for the sake of mining.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like I saw this article on Hacker News where somebody bought so many CPUs for mining Ethereum that they're actually trying to rent it out to machine learning people to run whatever like algorithms they have, and it's actually going to be more profitable to do that than to mine cryptocurrency. Yeah. So I mean it's weird. I mean that's why Nvidia, their stocks went up so much, I believe.
Yeah, I've been seeing them go up a lot. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure how much is like machine learning hardware versus just like dude trying to mine Bitcoin.
Yeah. So what do you think of the sustainability of that? Because we're saying how much energy it costs, like it's more efficient just to rent out the servers and actually mine. Right. Like, how do you see that progressing in the future to be more sustainable and actually like a viable option? Because right now it's probably at like a small fraction of what like you would think it's going to grow to.
Right.
Like, a lot of people are very hyped on things going to grow. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that, on the sustainability?
The idea is that, so people are trying to solve this in two ways, because as you know, Bitcoin mining is taking up, I think, the same amount of energy as, I believe, Ireland.
Really?
Or Sweden. I think one of those.
Yeah, that's fun. We were talking about Ethereum mining last week, and it was Turkmenistan.
Oh, there you go.
It was like 1.5 million. That was just Ethereum. So I don't know when you combine them all together, but yeah, like Ireland, like
there's some countries.
It's a lot of energy.
Like that energy could be used for something else for sure. I mean, there's people that don't have like proper electricity, you know.
Yeah.
These you're trying to mine this like bunch of numbers, you know.
Yeah.
It's quite ridiculous in some ways, but they're trying to solve it in basically two ways right now. So what makes mining inefficient and energy like intensive is that proof of work algorithm, which is everybody is trying to calculate a specific number based on the transactions. They're doing like repetitive hashing basically. And the issue with this is that there's no other way as of now that people can find these numbers except just by like randomly repeating calculations.
Everything, yeah.
Exactly. But what they're trying to do now is say, look, maybe you don't need this algorithm. So let me take one step back. So the reason they're doing this proof of work thing is to randomly elect somebody in this network to become the validator of blocks. This goes back to a concept of what you call fairness. Like, what is it to be fair? So in a network where everybody is like joining into this network and they can put in transactions, the only way to be fair is to be something that's random, like truly random.
But isn't it less random? Like you buy more computing power, so you can have more chances to like get the number right and be on the network.
Right. So
people like take advantage of it, but now it makes it so hard that it's just as random.
The algorithm itself is still random,
right?
But the idea is just that some people have more chances of getting this thing. But that's why the original proof of work thing was invented. They were trying to find a way to create like randomness basically, and to make sure that you couldn't create identities easily to make yourself bigger. But of course we know now it's not so true because you have these big like mining pools and everything. But that's the thing. They have to solve this problem, they still have to keep that aspect of it. And the one way they're doing it now is to do something called proof of stake, which is instead of just randomly selecting people on this network based on some, just based on their computing power or something, it will be based on how many tokens you hold on this network. Let's say you hold 100 tokens and I hold 10 tokens. The idea is that you should technically have 10 times more chances of creating blocks than me. And the idea is that if you do something like this, then you don't need to have everybody doing the same computation to try and put themselves into this lottery. The idea is that we already know who should have more power based on the number of tokens that they have.
But how do they get tokens? Do they get tokens for making the blocks?
People can get tokens for making the blocks, or they can buy it, or they...
It's kind of how it is now. But it's interesting, if it's by making blocks, the more blocks you make, the more tokens you get, the more likely you are to make blocks to get more tokens.
Yeah, so the richer gets richer, and the poor... I raised this question to Rafael Paz, our professor, and he said, well, that's the way the world works. I think maybe a better solution is to say, at some point, it's not a linear increase, but it goes down afterwards. So maybe, let's say when you have 10 tokens, you get a certain amount of, let's say you get 10 votes. But let's say when you have 20 tokens, you only get 15 votes. When you get 30 tokens, you only get 12 votes. 17 votes. So the amount of...
You still get more votes, but each token gives you marginally less votes, you're saying?
Exactly. So your power decreases the more money you have.
Right, the rate of it, yeah. Interesting.
Something along those lines. That's one way they're trying to solve this problem. But then another way, which is I think a lot of the more like recent projects that are coming out are doing, is to try and say, look, we don't need to have everybody validating everything all the time. What we need to do is to have some assumption about the network. Say, we're going to assume, like Bitcoin, let's say half the people are good. At least half the people are good. So if we just randomly select 100 people, at least 50 something of them is going to be good. And this is one of the reasons why mining is slow in the first place. Like one of the reasons that everybody has to accept this like verification process. Everybody has to communicate to each other that, look, I found something and that you should accept this. Getting 1 million or 10 million people to agree takes much more time than, let's say, 100 people for the networking part. So what they're trying to do now is to say, look, we're going to elect just 100 people from this network randomly, and then through some way of randomly, like truly randomly selecting a leader within this group of people that will validate a block, for instance. There is some very interesting things about how they're doing this random selection. So one of the projects which is being worked on by a professor at MIT, he's called Silvio Micali, and he's Rafael Pass's advisor
awesome.
from MIT, and he's like, in China we call these people like big cows. They're just like, and so he came up with this protocol called like Algorand.
Okay.
And the idea is that to create this randomness, they get the transaction, which is now some like random some bits of number. They put the time at the back of it, and then they take the hash of this thing, which let's say comes out to the number, 10, for instance. And then the idea is that then they have a group of people, let's say 100 people. Everybody has a unique number. Let's say between 1 to 100. And all they say is that, look, the hash just now, which came out to the number 10, whichever number that is closest to whichever person that is closest to, that person becomes the validator of this block. And the idea is that now you no longer need to do this like crazy proof of work to say that you won. Now this network has some way of deciding randomly who to pick. There's a lot of details in these things, but I think it comes down to basically to like how they're trying to make this system more efficient is to have a more effective way of choosing somebody randomly, and to have less people doing the validation, but trying to keep the same level of security.
Yeah, so would that take away the need for mining then, if it's this random election of a small group of people? Or are they still mining in that?
They're still mining, but then I guess the idea is that it will be more fair, so that technically like we can plug in our laptops and we would get a chance to mine on this network. You just won't become like super rich anymore, I guess.
Right. So does that take away the sustainability problem though, if everyone's still mining?
The way they're mining would be a little bit different then. You basically just join the network and you don't need to do all this like super complex calculation.
So it's more, just a sign in as opposed to doing a lot of work in order to do validation. It'd still be considered mining, but all the excess computing power wouldn't be needed anymore.
Yeah, exactly. At least to me, I think a lot of this stuff around like, because in essence, mining is, or like validating blocks is voting. People are trying to figure out more effective ways of doing voting, like through computers. I think this is all, I think maybe open problems. Like, will this be effective? How will it incentivize people? Maybe now for whatever reason, there's some new problems that they didn't think about, and it's not like, environmental problems. Now maybe it's like, I don't know, people bribing other people somehow. I don't know.
Like
but
other issues with the system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But hopefully this guy from MIT who's a big cow thought about this.
Uses it, figured out. Yeah, that'd be cool, because that's something. Yeah, there's some things that just aren't sustainable with it. So I know a lot of different teams are working on this. Hopefully this guy comes up with something.
Actually, let me ask you a question.
Yeah, for sure.
Most people took one cryptocurrency or like blockchain or cryptography course. I think you're one of the few people that decided to not take any of these courses. Why did you not take any of them?
I'm not taking them next year. I signed up. I'm auditing one of them, so I have access to all the videos.
Okay.
I need to go over more. I did sit on one of our Jules' class. It was really interesting. I tried to ask as many questions because it basically just conflicted with other classes I wanted to take. I was going to take them next year. Hopefully they'll still be good next year and have more time to concentrate on it. But yeah, I figured if it was, I think TMD, like Tech Media Democracy, is one of the classes that conflicted. So like we didn't have it one Wednesday, so I just like went in there. It's like, wait, why am I not taking this?
It was like the same time as another course. It was TMD, right?
Yeah. So, and maybe I think the other one, interactive devices, I really wanted to take because Wendy Ju's my advisor, and that's a really cool class too.
Right.
So just scheduling mostly, but yeah, I do want to take it next year.
Do you think that cryptocurrency will be a like bubble, and that like the hype it's too early to actually be something? Like, I mean, just from your opinion.
Yeah, I don't have enough expertise to tell. I think given the hype behind it, it'll be around in the foreseeable future. It's one of the technologies that people have a lot of interest in.
Right.
I think blockchain development, there's a lot more calls to that to make smart contracts. So I see developers getting very interested in it, and I think, I forget what talk I went to, but someone said, like, if you want to see what the future is, like, look at what developers are doing now. Like, if you want to see what's going on in 5 to 10 years, like, what are developers doing in their free time? It's like that type of stuff. I think blockchain people are very interested in everywhere I go. Like, from here, we're in a very tech space. I went home to Las Vegas. Like, people our age were just talking to me about cryptocurrencies the whole time. Like, it's more out there than I thought. Like, people trade it. Like, people are super into it, so I think it'll be around a while. Right. As far as bubbles and stuff, it's extremely volatile. Like, looking at what Bitcoin happened the end of last year, beginning of this year. Yeah, it shot up to like 19 at some point. Now it's down to around 8. Like, it's super interesting. I think it's a lot of hype right now, and like people are trying to figure out the exact use cases for it. Because it's interesting, because it takes existing things like databases and stuff and makes it decentralized. So you don't get a whole new like a new product, kind of. It's just a new way of doing something we've always done. And there's a lot of advantages that people are excited about, but there's some problems with it that are being worked out. But I think in time they will be worked out, and we'll start seeing some of the applications of them. Yeah, but I don't see it going anywhere. I see it picking up steam, and like the world figuring out how it fits into the current ecosystem, which is like tech in general, figuring out how it works with governments and countries and how we do things already. I'm always trying to figure out more about it because people are very into it. And it's been interesting knowing the technology is super interesting as well, like how it works. And so I don't know if it'll like be forever, but I think there's enough interest in it that it'll be around for a while and that it'll grow and be better.
But it's definitely harder to, I think, find jobs at bigger companies if you're... Maybe it's changing a little bit, but...
Right.
I mean, like from our career fairs, and other stuff, it's much harder, I think. That's one reason I think a lot of people cannot get into it.
Right. I think I find the same thing because I'm interested in like augmented reality and brain control interfaces, and it's just super hard to find those things. Like you have to have a very specific company, and like these type of things are hard, so they want like PhDs to like do them. So it's not as mainstream as like I've been doing web development for a few years, and there's a lot of web development jobs because like everyone uses the web. So I think it's just such a nascent technology that it's hard to find like good paying jobs that are super dedicated to it. So I definitely see it like growing in the future, but like right now, development is mainly like application web development. There's a lot of data science, like machine learning. That's why I've been looking at like computer vision, which kind of mixes machine learning and AR. There's like certain paths you can take that kind of mix stuff together. That like that's what I'm looking for, like how to get into these things that are new. I see a lot of investments into cryptocurrencies and just blockchain technology in general. And I definitely see it growing in the next few years, and we'll see from there. But I was looking at like TopTal. Have you heard of them? They're like my friend's company. They're like a freelancing website. So you have to like basically interview with them to get onto the site, and then they hook you up with like a couple months contracts or maybe up to a year or more. Like,
TopTal? Yeah,
really cool company. My friend Brendan Benishot started that. I've had a lot of friends work on it. TOPTAL. Yeah, I think they have like specializations you can do as well, and like one's like blockchain application development.
Really?
Yeah, so I'm definitely seeing it, and I've seen some like requests for that. And I have another friend who made what calls like truffle something. I haven't looked at it, but a lot of people are doing like smart contract.
Oh, you know somebody that made truffle?
Not truffle, but like mixed truffle with the React, I believe. I haven't looked at it too closely because I don't know truffle. Was that a smart contract builder or like framework? I haven't used it.
It's like, Express.js. I would think of it as like Express.js for like smart contracts on
Gotcha.
Ethereum.
Does it sit on Node or was that?
Yeah, it's Node.
Oh, so instead of Express, you're using like a smart contract wrapper sort of thing.
Exactly. It's
Cool.
like the framework that everybody uses because it's the only one that really works.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I need to look into that. So I feel like there are people. There's a scene. They're starting to be open. So like if someone I went to high school with, like just like made a. I saw on Reddit. I'm like, I think my friend's been talking about stuff. I think he works for Wayfair, and he's like. And I was like, I double checked like his Facebook. He's like, oh yeah, like, it's my friend on Reddit posting about like.
That's the same guy.
Yeah, the same dude. So it's cool. Like, there's definitely a lot of developers like in on it, like people very interested in it. So
right.
yeah, I think it would be more jobs popping up. But there's probably, I'd imagine there's some in the city that are looking for some like smart contract developers. I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't searched too hard.
Yeah, so in Brooklyn there's a big like blockchain. I don't even know what you call them anymore. They're called consensus. So consensus with a SYS.
I've seen that name. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's founded by this guy called Joe Lubin, and he is a super early investor and creator of the Ethereum network. I think he was one of the founders, but I forget exactly specific his role. Mm-hmm. So he created this place in Brooklyn, and he was incubating projects that are building stuff on Ethereum. So like Truffle is one of the projects.
Okay.
And now I heard they have, like a couple of years ago when I went to their office, there was maybe like 10 people. And it was literally in some ghetto part of Bushwick.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it's terrible. Now they have 600 people globally. They just bought a building next door.
Jeez.
So, I mean, I think they're creating a lot of jobs for sure. Like I think there's definitely a lot of opportunities and stuff. I think from like just a job perspective, a lot of people think they're so unstable that, I mean, they're like they're startups, but they're startups in a space that a lot of people think is a startup space. You know, it's like you're building a startup on top of some unstable space. You're like unstable on top of unstable.
Very volatile in general. Like, blockchain and crypto.
There's a lot of way to die. Basically.
Yeah, what does consensus do?
My understanding is they have a couple of pieces. I think they call them. They have some weird name like spokes and stuff like that.
Oh, okay, like wheels and spokes and hubs. Yeah,
I think something like that. Yeah. So they have one part that is like funding development of projects.
That's cool.
And then they have one part that is like consulting for big companies. They have one part that's like education, trying to like teach people. They have some like internal like projects that they run themselves. It's
It all revolves around blockchain.
Yeah, it's specifically Ethereum, I believe.
Okay.
Anything that uses Ethereum, they're funding.
Yeah.
And I mean, they must have gotten super rich from all the tokens they're holding basically.
Interesting.
So yeah, I think that's one of the things which is driving this. A lot of people got basically free money in some ways.
Yeah.
And yeah, but it's even hard to hire now. I think I was speaking to a friend who's going to SF to work and as like a software developer for a blockchain company. Mm-hmm. This company is like they're very technical and stuff, and I mean he's getting paid like 150, 160K, and I mean hiring seems to be super competitive still. Mm-hmm. But I guess they can afford it because that's why they got a lot of basically free dollars.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I'm thinking like AngelList. I've seen blockchain like developers too.
Yeah.
Like there's some like startups looking for that.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think that everybody in our school should at some point like just go and work for. If they're not dependent on visas, mm-hmm. I think. Because I think in my opinion, like, we spent all this time and like so much of our life, not just blockchains, but in my opinion, blockchains, because we spend so much time just and like we're trying to invest in ourselves to do something. I think it's important that we don't try and take the safest route now. It's like we've already taken all of this risk. Maybe it would have been better if we just stayed at some like company that we were at before and just like try and climb the ladder or something. But we took a risk to now we're going to take ourselves out of the job market, go to the school. Yes, it's a great school, it's a great name, but when you come out, you're competing now with new students younger than us who are thinking a little bit different, and So I think it's important that we try and do the things that are risky but that are also super rewarding if we succeed. It's like investing and like betting. I think that's kind of how I see it.
No, I totally agree. Yeah, that's why I'm here. I could have kept doing web development and stuff. I saw a lot of cool new technologies coming that I'm very interested in. Wanted to learn, get a head start on it.
I mean, you probably would have made a pretty good living and just continuing, because you would just build. It would just be easier, and then you'll be building on what you have worked on before.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then dedicate full time to like web development, and then keep up all the current stuff. And yeah, there's a lot of demand. Still get emails a lot for web dev roles.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a bet, and there's always risk in every bet. So
yeah. Yeah, but I think if you're passionate about it, even like stability and stuff, and I know like depending on visas too, but if it's something that you enjoy and good at, like there's probably, and as long as the whole market doesn't go away, which I don't think it will, like maybe a company will close down, but there's more blockchain companies.
Right.
Yeah.
Wait, you said you're from Las Vegas?
Mm-hmm.
That company, that shoe company.
Zappos. Yeah.
They're based in Las Vegas,
They are.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a big tech scene in Las Vegas?
I wouldn't say a big one.
Right.
It's interesting though. Like CES is there, E3. So there's a lot of big events that are tech based, and it's close to California. Yeah, I think like Zappos is a big company there. Not a lot of people take advantage of the city. I don't think there's a huge like intellectualism coming from the city. It's a lot of like you can get like jobs on the strip pretty easily without having to have like an education background. But yeah, I think it's like no income tax in Las Vegas. There's definitely a lot of advantages to like corporations starting in Nevada, and not a huge tech scene there.
I read that a state called Wyoming have recently just changed their corporate law structures, and they're trying to be the cryptocurrency.
Oh, Wyoming?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know much.
I haven't heard that. That's cool.
Yes, so they're trying to take advantage. So they're like, if you launch an ICO or whatever, you should go to Wyoming, and then they won't basically put you in jail.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on ICOs? Last guest we had thought there's like a lot of scamming involved with ICOs and stuff. So what do you think about them?
I wasn't super big into the ICOs. For me, when I was looking at them, I wasn't so much looking at them from just investment perspective. I was mainly interested in the technology and the ideas they're trying to put forward. So, and I don't know if there's a direct correlation between good technology, good ideas, and higher investments. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. I mean, there's definitely scams. We heard about all these, like, I mean, there was this token called can you swear on this? Yeah, it's like a fuck token. It's for Reddit. It's like if you want to give a F, I mean, that's not a scam. They wrote a white paper, like a 2-page white paper. It was the funniest thing I've ever read. And I mean, that to be honest, I don't think that's a scam. I actually think F token is a legitimate token.
How much money they raise?
They raise, I think.
Loan.
No, yeah, exactly. They raise money through Twitter, and I think they raised $60,000
Nice.
of Ethereum and Bitcoin, which is now probably worth like $1 million.
Oh, okay. They
So
raised it back in the day.
These two dudes, it was crazy. So I think that's actually legit. But there's definitely some that's like trying to scam people. Facebook's banning ICO ads.
Yeah, I think Google too, right?
YouTube, exactly. Yeah. There's always going to be scams, but I think the consensus is that the overall quality of ICOs is dropping just because now there's so many like crappy projects. Mm-hmm. But for instance, the Telegram ICO, which is supposed to be the biggest ICO in history, they raised $800 million. Wow. I don't know if Jonathan talked about this.
No.
So a couple weeks ago, they raised $850 million. Wow. Not even launching a public token. Investors went to them and said, look, we want to invest in this blockchain thing. They're developing this blockchain. And then now they're raising another $807 million. And then they're going to go public, which is probably predicted to raise like billions. So I think that there's a lot of money in this. I think it will be similar to this, in some sense, to startup investing, where when there's bad quality projects, good projects are going to get more money. Mm. So that, if you're a good project in this space, you're actually going to be getting a lot more extra money than if you were if there wasn't so many bad projects. Yeah. I mean, the reason there's bad projects, there's a lot of just extra money.
Yeah.
And maybe this goes back to like, why is there all this like extra money in the first place? Where did all of this stuff come from? And that's an interesting like question by itself. I mean, it's like,
where's all this investment capital coming from?
Yeah, like what like nothing just comes out of thin air. But I mean, a lot of people say that it was since the economic crash in 2008, or even before that, not just in the U.S. but I mean China. So they printed out so much money to keep the economy like the way it is. They basically just like created giant amount of inflation, and maybe a lot of people say that's one of the reasons why there's all this free money lying around in cryptocurrencies. Is basically this, whatever amount of money is in cryptocurrencies is directly correlated to the amount of inflation there are in the market. So this is all the fake money that governments and banks printed, basically.
It's really interesting. Yeah. So all the inflation, just we think, kind of shifted to cryptocurrencies as opposed to going back into like the regular economy. That's one theory. Yeah,
especially from a lot of like Asian countries. A lot of people made a lot of money from this inflated fake money, and then they're trying to like put it somewhere that holds value, that will appreciate.
Yeah.
And then they put it into blockchains, and also like now the issue is, this is always something that I found very interesting with startups, like evaluation, like how much some network is worth, right? People say a network is worth $1 billion or whatever. If I buy one share of something for $10,000 and there was 1 million shares, does that make this thing worth, I don't know, 10,000 times 1 million?
Right.
So, but then the issue is that once people accept that this thing is worth this amount of money, they can take all of this fake stuff or this non-existent stuff and like sell it and use it.
Right.
So it's like, maybe they're just printing money on top of money, but there's also interesting things like, well, maybe this is better than governments and central banks printing money.
Right. I have a friend working on a project called Basecoin. My friend Lawrence played like football with him in Princeton, one of the smartest guys I know, and that's what him and his two co-founders like concept is, like a stable currency that ties right now to the dollar and then will tie to like a basket of goods. So it keeps it like stable and like working with government to make it like how do you actually use it in the real world. I think he has investment from like Andreessen Horowitz as well and Bain Capital. I'll have to double check, but I think those two. Yeah, there's a ton of money.
Dude, that's awesome. I mean, yeah, like stable coins. I would love to learn more about that.
Yeah, I can send you the white paper and like they have a good graphic on it, but it should be hopefully coming out soon. I think it's pretty soon. But yeah, I've been seeing him like all year. He's been like very dedicated building this thing out. Yeah, it should be good.
Oh, and how big's their team? Do you know?
I know just 3 founders. They all went to like Princeton, like magna cum laude in computer science. Like worked at Google, D. Shaw. Like
super smart.
Super smart. Like the smartest dude I know, and like like his best friend for like ever has been like the same track as him as well, and like they're super smart. Yeah, so I'm excited to see where that goes.
Oh,
yeah.
That's another thing, at least I think is interesting, is that, like you said, all the smartest people that I know, a lot of them are working in cryptocurrencies, and, not just crypto, but like blockchain related stuff. I think that's always a good sign. Not even just people, but the early pioneers of like the internet. I don't know where they went after the internet was founded. Like, did they take just like a long sabbatical or something? Like, they just went on holiday for like 20 years.
Yeah. And now they're back with blockchains.
Yeah, they're just like, hey, we're back. We invented HTTP.
Yeah.
We invented this like hashing function that everyone in the world uses. We're gonna work on blockchain.
Now we're concentrating on blockchain.
I know, it's like amazing. It's crazy. Yeah.
Awesome, Rongxin. Well, thank you so much for everything. It was super interesting stuff. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to the Style is Free podcast. Tune in next time. We will talk about more blockchains. We'll talk about flying cars. We'll talk about the internet, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, machine learning, every buzzword you could ever imagine, SEO. We'll get into it all. We'll do it all. See you then, next time, on the Style is Free podcast. I'm your host, Brett Liebowitz.